It began quietly, like so many strange stories born in the shadow of wartime fear. The summer of 1942 had wrapped the American home front in a strange mixture of restlessness and dread. Families rationed sugar and rubber, young men marched off to training camps, and radios buzzed each evening with news from distant battlefields. But in the small city of Pascagoula, Mississippi, a different kind of unease was taking shape, one that had nothing to do with soldiers or submarines, and everything to do with a faceless presence slipping through windows in the dark. People would later say they felt it before they ever heard the name. A subtle shift in the mood of the town. Curtains pulled a little tighter, mothers keeping their children closer at dusk, doors that used to stay unlocked suddenly clicking shut at night. A quiet fear spreading through neighborhoods where life once moved slowly, predictably, peacefully. And in the middle of it all, a single question began to echo. Who was breaking into homes, only to cut someone's hair? The newspapers eventually gave him a name, the Phantom Barber, a title that sounded almost playful at first, like something out of a campfire story. But nothing about what unfolded that summer felt playful, not to the people who woke up to find locks bypassed, screens sliced open, and strands of freshly cut hair scattered across their bedsheets. Not to the families who slept uneasily in their own homes, wondering if they'd feel cold scissors brushing against them in the night. And certainly not to the police, who found themselves chasing an intruder who slipped through the city like a ghost. To understand why this story gripped the nation, you have to picture Pascagoula in 1942. Nestled along the Gulf Coast, it was a shipbuilding center, important, busy, and a prime target for enemy espionage. German U-boats lurked in the waters offshore. The government warned that spies might try to steal information or sabotage defenses. So, when the first reports of odd nighttime intrusions surfaced, many locals didn't chalk it up to mischief. They wondered whether something darker was unfolding. It started with whispers. Someone's daughter thought she heard a noise at her window. A couple woke to find their screen slashed. But there was no stolen jewelry, no ransacked drawers, nothing missing at all. People shrugged it off, at least at first. Maybe a prowling animal, maybe a prankster, maybe the stress of the war stirring up imaginations. But then came the first incident no one could explain away. A 16-year-old girl woke one morning and felt something strange as she ran her hand through her hair. A chunk of it was gone, cleanly cut, not torn, not tangled, cut. She didn't wake up during the night, she didn't hear anyone, but the evidence was there, scattered across her pillow like some bizarre calling card. When her parents reported it, police took note, curious, unsettled, but unsure what to make of it. After all, who breaks into a home and leaves everything untouched except a lock of hair? Then came another report, and another. Each one nearly identical, someone slipping in through a window, avoiding detection, and clipping hair from unsuspecting victims as they slept. Sometimes just a few strands, sometimes large sections. Always silent, always gone before the victims woke. Newspapers seized on the story. The war had dominated headlines for months, and here was something eerie, something local, something that stirred an entirely different kind of fear. The nation was already tense, and now there was talk of a phantom prowling through bedroom windows. The more the story spread, the more the intruder seemed to grow into something larger than life, an almost mythical figure whose presence inspired the kind of fear you feel in your bones. Even the police struggled to make sense of it, and they didn't hide their frustration. There were no fingerprints, no footprints, no clear motive. If the intruder had been stealing valuables, they would have known what kind of criminal they were dealing with. But what kind of person risked breaking into homes just for hair? Some thought it was a lunatic. Others believed it was someone practicing for a more sinister crime. And in a town living under the constant strain of wartime anxiety, theories multiplied like shadows. Maybe the intruder was collecting hair for some kind of ritual. Maybe it was a fetish. Or, and this was the theory that caught the most attention, maybe it was connected to the war. People whispered about enemy agents disguised as civilians, gathering hair for identification purposes or even for experiments. None of these theories made much sense, but fear rarely waits for logic to catch up. As the weeks passed, the intrusions became bolder. Families slept with windows nailed shut, and men took shifts, staying awake through the night. Even so, The Phantom Barber somehow managed to slip in and out of homes without leaving a trace. His victims weren't limited by age or gender. Some were children, some were adults. But all of them shared the same chilling experience of waking in the morning to find that someone had stood beside their bed in the dark, just inches from their sleeping faces. Pascagoula was not the kind of place accustomed to this sort of mystery. It was a community where people knew their neighbours, where gossip travelled quickly, where the police force rarely handled anything more dramatic than bar fights. Now they were in the middle of a case that baffled them at every turn, and as the story continued to grow, so did the panic. Parents forbade their children from playing outside after nightfall. Shopkeepers exchanged rumours over counters. Reporters poured into town, hoping to catch the latest twist in the bizarre saga. Everyone wanted answers, but the Phantom Barber left none. And so the legend began to take shape, built not on what people knew, but on everything they didn't. A shadowy figure slipping silently through the night, a pair of scissors glinting in the moonlight, locks of hair drifting to the floor as someone slept unaware of the presence beside them. No one could say whether he was harmless or dangerous, whether he was working alone or part of something bigger, whether he would escalate. In the absence of facts, fear filled the empty spaces. The summer wore on, humid and heavy, and beneath the heat lingered the quiet, suffocating suspicion that the Phantom Barber was watching, listening, choosing, and that at any moment he might strike again. That was only the beginning of the story, the calm before the chaos. What came next would shake the town even harder, pushing the mystery from unsettling to terrifying, and leaving behind questions that still haunt historians today. As summer deepened and the heat pressed down on Pascagoula like a heavy blanket, the strange intrusions that once seemed unnerving began to feel ominous. People hoped the incidents would fade, that the Phantom Barber would vanish as quietly as he had appeared. But instead, he grew bolder, more daring, almost as if he were feeding on the panic he created. One night, the stillness was shattered in a way no one expected. Two young girls, both students at the local convent school, were sleeping in their dormitory when a shadow slipped inside. The next morning, the entire building erupted in alarm. The girls had woken up terrified, shaken, insisting that a man had been in their room. He hadn't spoken, he hadn't stolen anything, but he had cut their hair, large portions of it. Clean, precise cuts, strands left behind on the sheets like a signature. For the first time, someone had actually seen him. Their descriptions were hazy, dark clothing, a quick movement, a figure that seemed to melt into the night. But it was enough to send the entire city spiraling into fear. The intruder wasn't just a rumor or a strange headline anymore. He was real. He had slipped into a room full of sleeping children, and he had escaped effortlessly. Police descended on the school, doors were inspected, windows examined, guards stationed. But the more they investigated, the worse the fear became. The Phantom Barber had gotten inside a secured building, surrounded by adults. He had walked among rows of sleeping girls without making a sound. And if he could do that, then nowhere in town felt safe anymore. Rumours spread faster than facts ever could. People whispered about a man who could pick locks without tools, who could climb walls like a cat, who could move without making a sound. Others claimed he used chemicals to keep victims asleep, or that he had training in stealth from a foreign military. Some insisted he was living among them, blending in during the day, watching his next targets. As pressure mounted, police intensified their efforts. Officers patrolled neighbourhoods on foot. Volunteers formed watch groups armed, with flashlights, bats, and hunting rifles. Reporters from across the country came to Pascagoula, filing stories that mixed fear, curiosity, and a hint of disbelief. A mysterious prowler breaking into homes just to cut hair. How could something so absurd also be so terrifying? The answer lay in the simplest fear of all, the fear of being watched when you think you're alone. Then, just as the town thought the situation couldn't become stranger, the story took a darker turn. A well-known local magnate, one of the wealthiest men in Pascagoula, reported a violent break-in at his home. He and his wife had been attacked during the night. This time, the intruder wasn't silent or delicate. The couple had been struck, beaten, left bruised and bloodied. And in the middle of the chaos, the attacker tore through the wife's hair with brutal force, ripping out sections and leaving them across the floor. Authorities immediately linked the attack to the Phantom Barber. But this incident was nothing like the others. It felt frenzied, aggressive, personal, almost as if the intruder had escalated, crossing a line from eerie to dangerous. The town reached a breaking point. Fear became anger. Residents demanded answers, demanded an arrest, demanded the return of the quiet nights they once took for granted. Police faced increasing pressure from officials and citizens alike, and the force scrambled to produce suspects, leads, anything that would calm the storm. And soon, they announced they had their man. A local resident named William Dolan was taken into custody. Dolan was a chemist by trade, living alone, and known for having a contentious relationship with the magnate who had been attacked. Police found a set of German currency in his home, fueling suspicions that he might be involved in espionage, aligning perfectly with the wartime paranoia that had gripped the Gulf Coast. Authorities claimed he held a grudge, had military training, and had the personality of someone capable of such intrusions. They announced he was guilty of at least the violent assault and likely the earlier break-ins as well. The newspapers splashed his arrest across headlines. Citizens rejoiced. Parents breathed easier. The Phantom Barber's reign of fear, it seemed, had finally ended. But beneath the surface, not everyone was convinced. Dolan insisted he was innocent, and something about the case felt too convenient. The evidence tying him to the earlier incidents was flimsy at best. The German bills? They were souvenirs from a friend. His so-called military skills? Exaggerated. And nothing found in his home connected him to the hair-cutting intrusions. No tools, no stolen locks of hair, no clothing matching descriptions given by the girls. Nothing. Even the violent attack didn't perfectly match the Phantom Barber's previous behavior. It was too chaotic, too loud, too sloppy. Almost like a copycat or a desperate attempt to frame someone. Yet the town wanted a villain, and Dolan became the perfect one. Still, the whispers persisted. Some residents continued to report strange noises at night. A handful swore they had seen someone lurking in backyards or slipping between houses, but these reports were dismissed as nerves, imagination, or leftover panic refusing to die down. What many didn't realize at the time was that the Phantom Barber story had struck a nerve deeper than anyone expected. It wasn't just about the haircuts or the break-ins. It was about vulnerability, about being watched, about the idea of someone crossing the boundary between safety and danger without warning. And even as Dolan sat behind bars, rumors about the barber continued to weave through the town like a ghost of the truth. What made the story even more chilling were the details that surfaced later, details that didn't fit neatly into the official explanation. The patterns of intrusion suggested someone agile, someone calm, someone methodical. Windows were cut with precision. Footsteps were rarely, if ever, found, and victims had not been harmed until suddenly they were. There were things the police never solved, things they never explained. Why hair? Why those specific victims? Why the strange surgical neatness of the cuts? And why did the incidents stop just as suddenly as they had begun? As the case grew colder and as wartime fears gave way to post-war relief, the Phantom Barber faded from headlines. But the mystery lingered, preserved in old clippings and family stories passed down through generations. And even now, historians looking back at that summer recognize something unsettling about the way it all unfolded. Something unfinished. Something that feels like a puzzle missing too many pieces. Because if the Phantom Barber truly was just a disturbed local man acting alone, then why did so many details remain unexplained? Why did the pattern of fear seem too deliberate? And why did the real story never quite match the official one? Those questions would only grow louder in the years that followed. And as the tale reaches its most chilling moments, one thing becomes clear. The Phantom Barber was more than a strange wartime legend. He was a reminder that some mysteries refused to stay buried. As the years passed and the war drew to a close, Pascagoula slowly began stitching its ordinary life back together. Shipyard workers returned to familiar routines, families focused on rebuilding, and the country turned its eyes toward victory celebrations rather than wartime terrors. The story of the Phantom Barber, once the talk of every dinner table and newspaper stand, slipped quietly into the background. But stories like this do not simply fade. They linger. They cling to the walls of old houses, drift through the memories of aging residents, and curl around the edges of forgotten police files. And in Pascagoula, many felt that the mystery had never truly been put to rest. Years after his conviction, William Dolan continued to proclaim his innocence. He wrote letters, appealed to officials, and insisted he had nothing to do with the intrusions or with the violent attack that had landed him behind bars. Eventually, the governor reduced his sentence, not because the state believed him innocent, but because doubts had crept into the case like unwelcome guests. Nothing tied him convincingly to the crimes. Nothing answered the lingering questions, and nothing explained why the Phantom Barber had chosen hair of all things as his strange target. Even after Dolan walked free, the truth remained murky. If he wasn't the Phantom Barber, then who was? That question hung over Pascagoula like a shadow. For some, the answer was simple. They believed the real intruder had left town before the police ever connected the dots. Others thought he might have been a transient, someone who passed through during the height of wartime chaos and disappeared without leaving a trace. A few suspected he had died, or joined the military, or changed his identity entirely. And there were those who whispered a darker theory that the culprit had been someone respected, someone the town would never suspect, someone quietly protected by people with influence. None of these theories were ever proven, but the uncertainty was enough to keep the legend alive. What made the story endure wasn't just the mystery of the intruder's identity. It was the almost theatrical nature of his crimes. He didn't steal, he didn't vandalize, he didn't whisper threats or leave messages. He simply cut hair, quietly, precisely, deliberately. It was unsettling not because it made sense, but because it didn't. And that was what terrified people most, the lack of logic. The sense that someone out there was slipping into homes for reasons no one could understand. Even now, generations later, that feeling still sends a chill through anyone who hears the story for the first time. Decades have passed since the summer of 1942, but old-timers in Pascagoula still talk about those nights when the town felt gripped by an unseen presence. Some claim their parents slept with chairs wedged beneath doorknobs. Others recall stories of dogs barking at shadows, of men standing guard on porches with shotguns resting across their laps. And then there were the children who grew up hearing their mothers warn them to close their windows tight because the barber might come back. Today, historians and true crime enthusiasts sift through the documents left behind yellowed newspaper clippings, brittle police reports, fading witness statements. Each page feels like a puzzle piece from a picture no one has ever been able to finish. They study the timelines, compare the accounts, and analyze the consistency of the intruder's behavior. Some see patterns that point toward a single culprit. Others see signs that more than one person might have been involved. But all of them reach the same conclusion. No explanation fits perfectly, and that's part of what makes this story so haunting. Unlike many old legends, the Phantom Barber wasn't a creation of folklore. He was real. His victims were real. His intrusions were reported, documented, investigated. The fear he created shaped a city, disrupted lives, and sparked a manhunt that stretched across an entire region. Yet, despite the evidence and the headlines, the identity of the Phantom Barber remains one of the strangest unsolved mysteries of the American home front. In the end, the question is not only who he was, but why he chose such an unsettling path. Was he a disturbed individual acting on impulses even he didn't understand? Was he testing his ability to move unseen? Was the hair symbolic, meaningful, or simply a bizarre fixation? Or did the entire ordeal mask a deeper, hidden motive that no one ever uncovered? The truth may never come to light. But the story endures because it taps into a fear that every person, in every generation, instinctively understands. The fear of vulnerability. The fear of being watched when you think you are safe. The fear of someone slipping silently into the one place you trust to protect you. Imagine lying in bed, the world outside calm and quiet, unaware that a stranger is standing inches away, close enough to touch your hair. Imagine waking the next morning and realizing someone had been there, so close that you could have reached out and brushed against them. That unsettling image has echoed for more than 80 years, passed down like a ghost story whispered at the edge of memory. And maybe that is the real reason the Phantom Barber still captures the imagination. It isn't just a tale of wartime paranoia or small-town panic. It's a reminder of how fragile a sense of safety can be, how quickly it can be broken, how even the quietest intruder can leave a mark on a community long after he disappears. Today, if you walk the streets of Pascagoula, you'd never guess that such a chilling mystery once gripped the town. The houses are peaceful, the yards quiet, the windows glowing warmly at night. But somewhere in the layers of local history, the legend still stirs, in the old neighborhoods, in the faded archives, in the stories grandparents tell with a half-nervous smile. And every so often, someone new hears the tale for the first time and asks the same question people asked back in 1942. Why hair? Why them? Why then? There are no clear answers, only possibilities, theories, and the chilling certainty that the real Phantom Barber was never definitively found. In the end, the story of the Phantom Barber is not just a wartime curiosity. It is one of the most bizarre, haunting, and enduring mysteries in American history, one that continues to fascinate and disturb because of what it reveals about fear, secrecy, and the fragile boundary between the safety of home and the unknown that lurks outside it. And even now, long after those strange summer nights have faded into history, the unanswered questions linger in the quiet spaces between truth and legend. Who slipped through the windows of Pascagoula? Who stood in those dark rooms with scissors glinting softly in the moonlight? And why did he vanish as silently as he arrived?